For 10 years, Daniel sent his ex-wife a bouquet of flowers every October, not out of love, but to mock her. His notes always said the same thing. Look how much better I'm doing without you. For 10 years, Sarah never answered. She never called. She never cried. And she never threw them away. Daniel thought her silence was proof that he had won the divorce. He had no idea she was just waiting for the perfect night to destroy his life. To the world, their marriage ended because Sarah had suddenly become cold and distant. That was the story Daniel told everyone. Friends, family, eventually his new circle of admirers, to protect his own reputation. Nobody ever questioned it. Nobody asked why a woman who once laughed so hard at her own wedding that the pastor had to pause had suddenly gone quiet. The truth was buried on a rainy night, 2 miles from their old house. Daniel had driven home drunk from a corporate dinner, the kind with too much wine and too many toasts, and struck a young mother named Elena Ruiz as she rode her bike home from a night shift at the hospital. He didn't stop. He drove home shaking, with a damaged fender and a shattered taillight. And when Sarah opened the door and saw his face, she knew something had happened that could not be undone. And that is where the trap was set. Sarah didn't call the police. She didn't leave him that night. Instead, while Daniel slept in a panicked haze, she quietly swept the broken glass from the driveway, hid the evidence, and made a choice that would cost her the next decade of her life. She found out which hospital Elena had been taken to. She began quietly funding the victim's medical bills through a lawyer in complete secrecy. Within months, the guilt and the secrets tore the marriage apart. Daniel filed for divorce, walked away thinking he was free, and rewrote the story to make Sarah look like the villain. Cold, distant, emotionally unavailable, he called her. Sarah let everyone believe it. Exactly 1 year later, on the anniversary of the divorce, the first bouquet arrived at her door. White lilies and a small card that read, "Look how well I'm doing without you." That was Daniel's biggest mistake, because that same morning, Sarah opened a locked drawer, took out a notebook, and began writing a record of everything he had done. She already knew exactly when he would read it. Grief has a way of becoming a schedule if you let it. For Daniel, the schedule was simple. Every October, on the anniversary of the divorce, he sent flowers to the woman he'd left behind, always with a note designed to remind her exactly how far ahead of her he believed himself to be. It became something of a private joke among his new friends, the kind of story he told at parties with a drink in his hand. "I still send my ex flowers every year, just to remind her what she gave up." People laughed. Nobody asked whether that was a strange thing to be proud of. Year 2, the card read, "Still thriving. Hope you're doing okay." Year 3, "New promotion, new car, new everything. Wonder what you're up to." Daniel's life, on the surface, looked like a highlight reel. He made partner at his firm 2 years ahead of schedule. He moved into a glass-walled condo downtown with a view of the harbor. He started dating a string of women who fit neatly into the kind of photographs that get captions like, "Blessed." By year 5, he was seeing a woman named Vanessa Pierce, the daughter of a well-known real estate developer. And their relationship had the polished, camera-ready quality of 2 people who understood that being seen together was part of the point. Every October, the flowers still arrived at Sarah's door. Every October, the cards got a little sharper, a little more triumphant, as though each year of her silence was proof to Daniel that he'd won something. What Daniel never noticed, what nobody around Sarah seemed to notice, was what she was actually doing with those 10 years. She left the practice where she'd worked during the marriage and started her own small physical therapy clinic 2 towns over, in a modest storefront with a hand-painted sign. It grew slowly, the way things built on trust tend to grow. Patients came back. They brought their friends. Within a few years, she had a waiting list. She also, without telling anyone, kept driving 20 minutes across town once a month to a rehabilitation center, where a woman named Elena Ruiz had spent the better part of 2 years relearning how to walk without a limp, how to hold a coffee cup without her hand shaking, how to be a mother to a little boy who had grown up faster than he should have had to. Sarah never told Elena who she was. To Elena, the woman who occasionally covered a physical therapy session, who once anonymously paid off the last of a crushing medical bill through a firm that specialized in exactly that kind of quiet arrangement, who left a grocery gift card in the mailbox the week Elena lost her second job. That woman was simply a friend from the hospital network, a story Sarah had built carefully enough that it never needed defending. At night, Sarah kept writing. Every October, after the flowers arrived, she sat at the same kitchen table, and she wrote another letter. Not for Daniel to read, not yet. She wrote them the way some people keep a diary, except every single letter was addressed in careful handwriting to him. Year 1 explained nothing. It simply described what the marriage had looked like from the inside during those final months. The fear, the sleepless nights, the sound of a car in the driveway at 2 in the morning. Year 2 described, in clinical, careful detail, exactly what she had found in that driveway. Year 3 documented, with dates and dollar amounts, the money she had quietly funneled toward a stranger's hospital bills. By year 5, the letters had stopped being about grief and started being about evidence. Sarah wasn't building a diary. She was building a record. She kept copies of everything. The lawyer's letters regarding the anonymous payments, a photograph of the taillight glass she'd swept off the driveway that night and kept, sealed, in a small evidence bag she'd bought at a hardware store. A printout of a local news article from that October about a hit-and-run investigation that had gone cold. And, most damning of all, 3 voicemails Daniel had left her in a drunken panic the night it happened. Voicemails she had saved on an external drive and backed up twice, just in case. There is a particular kind of patience that only exists in people who have decided, somewhere quiet inside themselves, that the truth will come out on their terms or not at all. Sarah had that patience. She wore it the way other people wear perfume, so consistently that nobody around her noticed it was there. By year 8, Elena Ruiz had fully recovered, remarried, and started her own small nonprofit helping hit-and-run survivors navigate the legal system. A nonprofit that had, coincidentally, received a substantial anonymous founding donation 3 years earlier. Elena's son was 14 now, tall, loud, obsessed with soccer, utterly unaware that a woman he'd never properly met had quietly made sure his mother never went a single month without rent. And every October, the flowers kept arriving. Daniel's cards kept getting more triumphant. Year 9. Getting married next spring. Vanessa's family owns half the coastline. Hope life's treating you fine. Sarah read that card standing in her kitchen, the same kitchen table where 9 notebooks now sat in a locked drawer. And for the first time in nearly a decade, she smiled. Not because she was happy for him, because she finally knew exactly when the 10th letter would be delivered. By the time the 10th October arrived, Daniel Cole's life looked, from the outside, like something out of a magazine spread, which, as it happened, It very nearly was. He'd made senior partner. His engagement to Vanessa Pierce had been announced in the city's business journal, right alongside a feature on the Pierce family's newest luxury development. A stretch of waterfront condominiums Daniel had personally helped broker. The wedding was set for the following June. A 600-guest affair at a vineyard 40 minutes outside the city, already the subject of a 3-page spread in a regional bridal magazine. Vanessa's father had begun quietly grooming Daniel to take a senior role in the family's development company, the kind of role that came with a board seat and a name on the letterhead. Daniel had, by every visible measure, become exactly the man he'd always wanted people to see. So this year, for the 10th anniversary of a divorce he still discussed like a trophy, he decided to outdo himself. He didn't call the usual florist. He called a boutique arrangement studio that did work for the Pierce family's events, and he ordered the largest bouquet they had ever assembled for a single delivery. White orchids, imported peonies, a hand-blown glass vase that alone cost more than Sarah's monthly rent had once been. He wrote the card himself, in his own handwriting this time, as though the occasion demanded a personal touch. 10 years. Look at everything I built without you. I almost feel like I should thank you for leaving. Here. He had the arrangement delivered on a Thursday morning, timed, though he would never admit this to anyone, not even to himself, to coincide with a small dinner he and Vanessa were hosting that same evening for her parents. A dinner meant to finalize the last details of the wedding and, not incidentally, the terms of his new position at her father's company. What Daniel did not know, what he could not have known, because he had spent 10 years assuming Sarah's silence meant she had nothing left to say, was that a package addressed to him had been sitting with a courier service since early that morning, scheduled for delivery to his own downtown address that same evening. Sarah had planned it for months. Not out of cruelty, though anyone hearing the story later might be forgiven for thinking so. She had planned it because she understood something about Daniel that 10 years of watching him send flowers had taught her. He needed an audience. He needed the moment to matter to someone other than himself. And so she chose the one night she knew, without question, that the people who mattered most to his future would be sitting in the room with him. The courier arrived at 7:40 that evening, 20 minutes into the dinner. Daniel's assistant had left the box with the building's concierge earlier that day, per Sarah's instructions, with clear notice that it was to be delivered directly to Mr. Cole's residence at exactly that hour. No earlier, no later. Vanessa's mother was the one who suggested he open it in front of everyone. "Is it a wedding gift?" she asked, delighted, assuming it was some elaborate gesture from a business associate. Daniel, flushed with wine and the particular confidence of a man who has never once considered that his past might arrive uninvited, agreed. He set the plain cardboard box on the dining table, in front of Vanessa, in front of her parents, in front of the future he had spent 10 years constructing on a foundation he had never bothered to examine. He cut the tape. He lifted the lid. Inside, resting on top, was a single envelope with his name written in familiar handwriting. Handwriting he hadn't seen in a decade, but recognized instantly, the way you recognize a voice from childhood, even after years of silence. Beneath it, 10 more envelopes, each one dated, each one sealed, arranged in careful chronological order. And beneath those, a small sealed evidence bag containing a shard of broken glass, a folder of financial records, and a compact flash drive with a single word written on it in black marker. Truth. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet right before something in them changes permanently. "What is this?" Vanessa asked. And there was already something shifting in her voice, not suspicion yet. Just the first small crack of it. Daniel picked up the top envelope. His hands, for the first time in 10 years of triumphant anniversary cards, were not steady. He opened the first letter first, the way you're always taught to. Start at the beginning. Year 1, it read at the top, in Sarah's careful handwriting. You sent me lilies today and told me to look at how well you're doing without me. I want you to know that I kept every flower you ever sent. Not because I miss you, because someday you're going to need to remember exactly how many years you spent celebrating instead of asking me why I really stopped talking. He read it once, frowning, the way a man reads something he assumes must be about hurt feelings and nothing more. Vanessa's father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Daniel almost set the letters down. Then he opened the second one, and the room learned why Sarah had waited 10 years. Year 2 described, in plain, unemotional language, the details of a rainy night. A street 2 miles from a house that no longer existed for either of them. A woman on a bicycle. A car that didn't stop. It described a fender Sarah had found damaged the next morning. A shard of taillight glass she'd swept from the driveway with her bare hands at 4 in the morning while Daniel slept, and sealed in a bag she had kept for a decade. In case a day like this one ever came, Daniel's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Daniel? Vanessa said quietly. What is she talking about? He didn't answer. He couldn't. He was already opening the third letter, then the fourth. Because some part of him, the part that had spent 10 years mistaking silence for surrender, needed to know exactly how much Sarah had kept. Year 3. Laid out, with dates and figures, the anonymous payment Sarah had made through a lawyer to a hospital account belonging to a woman named Elena Ruiz. Payments covering surgery, physical therapy, 6 months of missed wages after Elena lost her nursing position because she could no longer stand for 12-hour shifts. Year 4 explained why. It described, without cruelty, without exaggeration, the 3 voicemails Daniel had left Sarah the night of the accident. Panicked, half-drunk, begging her not to say anything, promising he'd figure it out, promising he'd make it right somehow. The letter noted, simply, that he never had. Year 5 described what it had cost Sarah to let their friends, their families, and eventually the entire city believe that she was the one who had changed. That she was cold. That she was the reason the marriage everyone had admired had quietly fallen apart. She wrote that she had let people believe the worst about her for 10 years because the alternative, telling the truth before she was ready, would have destroyed a man who, despite everything, she still didn't want destroyed by accident, only by choice. His. By the time Daniel reached the 9th and 10th letters, Vanessa's mother had stood up from the table without a word and walked to the window. Vanessa herself hadn't moved, but something in her expression had settled into a kind of stillness Daniel would recognize later, as the exact moment he lost her. The final letter was the shortest. You asked me every year to look at everything you built without me. I did look, Daniel. Every October, I looked very closely. And I want you to know that I built something too these last 10 years. A practice, a life, and a case. Elena Ruiz is doing well now. She remarried. Her son is 14. She runs a non-profit that helps people the system forgot about. The same system that never once asked why a hit-and-run case 2 miles from our old house went cold within a month. I never told the police what I knew. I told myself for years that was mercy. I think now it was just fear, mine, not yours. But I'm done being afraid, and I'm done watching you send me flowers like the last 10 years were a competition you won. Everything in this box, the letter, the voicemails, the payment records, the glass from the driveway, has already been copied. One set went to a lawyer 3 weeks ago. One set went this morning to Elena Ruiz, who has spent 10 years wondering who really hit her that night. What she does with it is her choice now, not mine, and not yours. I'm not asking you to confess. I'm not asking for anything at all. I just wanted you to open this in a room full of people who think they know who you are. The same way I spent 10 years in rooms full of people who thought they knew who I was. Happy anniversary, Daniel. This is the last bouquet you'll ever get to send me. The flash drive sat untouched on the table. Nobody needed it open to understand what it contained. Nobody at that dinner table said very much after that. Vanessa's father was the first to leave, murmuring something about needing to review a few things before the wedding could move forward, a sentence that everyone in the room understood to mean the wedding wasn't moving forward at all. Vanessa didn't cry. She simply stood, picked up her coat and left without looking back at the man she'd been planning to marry in June. The same quiet, deliberate exit Sarah herself had made 10 years earlier from a life that had looked perfect from the outside and had been quietly rotting from within. Daniel sat alone at the table for a long time afterward. The 10 letters spread in front of him like evidence at his own trial, because in every sense that mattered. That's exactly what they were. 3 weeks later, Elena Ruiz opened a package she hadn't been expecting, containing a letter from a woman named Sarah Whitfield. The first time in 10 years Sarah had used her own name in connection with any of it. The letter didn't ask Elena for forgiveness on Daniel's behalf. It simply told the truth, plainly, and left the decision of what came next entirely in Elena's hands. What Elena chose to do with that truth belongs to her story now, not Daniel's. But those close to both women say the two of them have spoken more than once since, quietly, without cameras or headlines, the way most real reckonings actually happen. As for Daniel, the senior partnership didn't survive the fallout either. Firms built on family alliances tend to unravel quickly once the alliance does. And by the following spring, the man who had once bragged at parties about the flowers he sent his ex-wife every year had very few parties left to attend. Sarah never sent him another bouquet, another card, another word. She didn't need to. For 10 years, Daniel had mistaken her silence for defeat, never once considering that some people don't stay quiet because they've lost. Some people stay quiet because they're building something far more patient than an argument, something that doesn't need to be shouted to land, because it was never designed to convince anyone in the moment. It was designed to be true when the moment finally arrived. Sarah's clinic is thriving these days. She still keeps a vase on her kitchen table, though it's never held lilies again. Just whatever she picks up herself on a Sunday, for no occasion at all. Because for the first time in a decade, she doesn't need an anniversary to remind her of anything. She already knows exactly what those 10 years were worth. 10 years is a long time to hold a secret. It makes you wonder, would you have had the same patience as Sarah? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to make sure you don't miss our next story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you for staying until the very end.